All right, welcome to our class again. We are starting this class today. We're continuing studying the communication strategies, but in terms of effective communication strategies. That's unit 1. So we're going to keep studying that. It's for about 5 weeks. This is the 3rd week, and we're in good shape for that. Today, we are going to talk about something that is about presentation, oral presentations. What you will call in English a presentation, in Spanish is exposición. And I'm making the point on this one because there's a problem when people try to translate. I have seen this, like the biggest mistake that you're going to use for an oral presentation when you are trying to say, oh, in my exposition. Hey, that doesn't exist. It's not that. The word in English exists. Let's say that's clear. Let's make that point. The word exists. But exposition in English, it means to expose someone or something. And if you're talking about my exposition, it's like you as a person, you are getting exposed. Like you did something wrong, then you're getting exposed. So exposition or getting exposed is not the same. It's not a translation for posición. It's something very different. So in English, it's oral presentation. So we're talking about a presentation. Okay, no exposition. Forget about that. Don't translate that because it's wrong. So it's about oral presentation. But today, since we're talking about these strategies, but effective communication strategies, when we have an audience, if we're going to present something, to present some information, then we should talk about the effective way to present. That's what we're going to talk, and that's what we're going to cover today. And like I said, this is part of unit 1. So let's just move forward to the next slide. And what we're going to see today, it's 2 different things. I put an example. I'm going to talk about an example on my life and a very professional presentation and information that I used over there. And of course, I'm going to talk about presenting your data as a pro, as a professional. How do you present your data? Data is that translation. I have to say this for Spanish speakers. Datos, información. That's the way you say it in English. It's only a way for saying it in, this is singular and plural. It's the same thing. Data. So there's no such thing as datos or data. No, it's data. It's a singular word, but it's used for that as translated for information. Okay. So when you are using data to present to an audience, then you want to do it in the best way. And I'm using the information. I decided to include the reference here at the beginning. Most of this information I'm covering today is from Joel Schwartzberg. He wrote this article about presenting your data like a pro. And it's from this page from Harvard Business Review. And it's published over there. You can just click on it and go and read it. And I'm presenting this information here from that particular reference. Most of the information is from that particular reference. And some other information will be from my own experience in life or professional oral presentation. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the example. When you're talking about presenting data and ways to effectively present data, I also included my picture over there. You can see it over there. That's from one conference that I presented an article, And so this is for real, okay? And that picture also, it's part of the information that I'm using here. This information, unfortunately, I cannot tell you all of the information because this is not actually the presentation for that particular article. But there's also another unfortunate thing, that there's a lot of information that it's confidential because this information is from an actual company. This company is Continental. It's based in Nogales, but this company is based around the world. It's an international company. And they fabricate, they produced a lot of different products. In this particular company based in Nogales, in this facility, they are producing, or this data is actually for the production of radios, for automobile radios, para el estéreo del carro, okay, for the stereo or radio. And I cannot tell you the brands of the cars because there are different brands, but I know them, but I cannot tell them to you because this is confidential information. But I can present you the data in a resume, and I can explain to you what this is about. So why am I using an example of my own experience? Okay, to tell you that a proficient way or a professional way on presenting, on using information is always the best. You could use a lot of text, but that's not a professional way to present information, to present your data. So in order to have data, there has to be an investigation behind that. Remember that we are engineers, we are scientists, we are using the scientific method. So we have a hypothesis and we test that hypothesis through experimentation, we collect data, and we finally gather the data into a graph, like what you're seeing here. So what you're taking a look on this graph is about the defects that those radio or those automobile stereos were presenting when they were getting produced. There were some defects on the bezel and the display. What are the bezel and what are the display? Okay, so you have a certain space for the radio. I'm just gonna call it radio on that way, but you know that I'm referring to the actual stereo from the automobile. So the display is all of the screen from that radio, and the bezel is like the surrounding area for that. And these radios were having used to, because it was corrected, the problem was corrected, it was fixed. They used to have some problems like, for example, you could see at the end of the product, the final product, you could see some fingerprints, you could see some scratches, you could see the presence of different colors. And that's a problem because on the display, the way that it's supposed to show, it was a different way. And in every company, you don't want that to happen, especially if that's your product and then the product goes and gets installed in the car. And then if they don't check it, and then the final client goes and gets to see his new car, his brand new car, really good, very shiny, and then goes and turns on the radio and it looks bad. It has scratches. So that shouldn't happen. And actually, and fortunately, it didn't happen up to the way that it goes installed into the car. But then when the brand is installing it, then they notice the problems and then the product comes back. And so that's a big problem, because if you are having to rework on the products, there's a lot of investment in human hours. There's a lot of investment in more materials. And then you have to put more effort into production because of that, because you have the effects. And so we focus on these two things, and it was about 6 defects that we were focused on them. We gathered the focus. If you see the title for this, it was about check, do, check. Check, do, check the defects and get rid of them. So that was the main idea. You have a problem and you're gonna use a technique. And that's why I'm showing you here just the basic information of what we did. Check, do, check, we gathered that from the Deming cycle, from check, from plan, do, check, act, and then go around, plan, do, check, act. So if you wanna go from check to back to check, you have to go all the way through the cycle. So how did we apply that? How did we started checking? How did we started observing? And how did we find the root for the problem? So that's when the Ishikawa diagram came in handy. We checked for materials, the method, the machine, if we had something with the environment, the measurements, and man. And it worked. We gathered a lot of information from that. We put it in tables, and then from that information, I gotta go back to this one. From that information, we got a lot of things. But we needed to decide on those different things that were causing the defects. And that's when the Pareto diagram came in handy. So we organized those problems into a Pareto chart, and then we had something that we could start working with. And that's how at the end, we could gather this information that you are seeing here. This chart that I'm presenting here, I'm telling you, the final results, we reduced by 88% the defects. In only about, the whole thing was done in 4 months, but it was actually done in half of that time. The collection of the information started during the month of September. This is from, this information that I'm showing you is from some investigation that we did in 2016. And it was presented also in 2016 at the end of the year. So that information gathered on September showed us the problems and how many defects we had and where to take action. That was the Pareto chart. And so with that information, we went and worked. We had a target for the display and the bezel. You can see it in blue and in green. That's why I showed those colors in here. And so we had a target that we needed to reduce those defects. So we started working on the problems. The problems that I mentioned to you, the problems that we used to have scratches on the screen. And how was it reduced? How did we reduce it from 83 to 22 on the bezel, and from 34 to having only 1? From, of course, from all of the samples that we were taking. So how did we get from this point to this? With the decisions that we took from the Pareto, we decided to go, for example, for the problems with the bezel, of having the fingerprints or having different colors because of the way that the pieces were put together. The solution for that was to include some fixtures. And the fixtures were built so that the operators, the people that were working with those radios wouldn't touch the screen. Since they were not touching them anymore, since these screens were put on a fixture that was holding them, almost all of the problems were solved just by building those fixtures. So we have to build the fixtures, we have to prove that they were working, we have to give some explanation and some training for the people over there. There was some training in October, there was some training in November. And finally, they learn how to use those fixtures. They have to change a little bit on how to assemble all of it. But in the end, we got rid of the defect. And that's what we needed to do. Got rid of the defect. Okay, so I'm using this information of this chart to explain all of what happened in some research of about 4 months. But it's not just about that. The cost effective of this research and to actually act, to put it into work, to change the way that those radios were being built or were being assembled, it earned, or it led us in the company to spend less and less and less money on that. I can only translate this in the terms of thousands of dollars that were saved just because of introducing some new fixtures to the way that it was assembled, to the assembly line. And these fixtures are really very cheap. It's a very little investment, very little investment. And with that, you can reduce the expenses of thousands and thousands of dollars. So in the end, everyone gained. But the only way for us to have known that we needed fixtures in order to reduce the defects that were present, it was analyzing. We needed to do and use all of these techniques to be able to prove and to use a different way, a different practice in the assembly line. And that's what you as industrial engineers do on the actual job. But I'm only presenting you the data because this is an oral presentation. You don't need to know step by step what happened, and I don't need to write down everything over here, or especially on a visual aid. On the slides, las diapositivas. So I'm not supposed to write everything because the focus of the presentation should be the information, the data, and me, the person who is presenting the data. So I should focus that information to you, the audience. So by now, in only very few minutes, like about 10 to 15 minutes, I already presented all of the information that we gathered and that we analyzed and what we concluded from this research and this practice and this, all of these tools that we employed, that we used in this work. Interesting, huh? I hope that you thought that it was interesting. And like I said, the resume of everything, it's only in this table. And I already explained it to you. So you're telling me, Professor, that I can use my slides more effective? Yes, that's the whole point of this. Remember that the unit is called Effective Communication Strategy. So we're talking about strategies on a way to present information here. So we're going to talk about a few points from that article that we read from Harvard Business. So let's talk about that. This has been my example, and I've shown you that it works. I presented this information in a conference, like I'm telling you, in an international conference, and I presented all of that information in also about 15 minutes. including the time for questions. So when you want to present information in such a short period of time, you need to organize your information in a way that it will be helpful, that organization. And you also need to practice beforehand. Because when you're presenting information, you have just a certain amount of time. And you're going to tell me, but in the company that I'm going to be working, they're going to give me an hour. They're going to have meetings, reuniones. But for the whole department, you are included and you may have 5 minutes, 10 minutes of that hour. So you need to organize your information and be ready to present in a short period of time. And also not just be ready, you need your audience to be paying attention to you. That's why, of course, you need to be dynamic, you need to use your body. But if you're using visual aids, your visual aids need to be good, close to excellent. How do we do that? So let's talk about the visual aids that you may be using. Las ayudas visuales, el PowerPoint that you may be using, and also the way that you're going to speak. Okay? Yes? Yes. Let's go and see what the recommendation is. And here's the thing. A good presentation includes data. I just told you about that. But the data alone, it doesn't guarantee a good presentation. That's why you need to organize the data. You need to know your data. And you need to practice on how to deliver that information, how to speak to your audience. We talked about that before, that you need to know your audience, that you need to plan ahead of time, that you need to plan before you present. And as a parenthesis, next week, we're going to talk about the anxiety. I have been announcing that we're going to talk about the anxiety when you present. Yes, next week, we're going to talk about that. But now, what are we going to talk on this? I was just introducing the topic, but we should be able to present data that can be seen. I'm going to take some time to speak a little more about this. Data that can be seen. How you put it in your visual aids. How you put your data in your PowerPoint. That's what it's talking about. Focus on the point your data illustrate. Go straight to the point. Focus on that. We also will take the time to talk about share one major point. Label, chart, components, the graphs. All of the graphs and figures that you're using should be labeled. Highlight the aha things that you are presenting. Yeah, I'm going to show you with examples, with real examples. And titles. You should also include titles on your slides, on your PowerPoints. Titles here, if you're changing the subject, use the titles, but the titles that relate to the data that you're presenting. And of course, presenting. How should you present the information? So let's go and take a moment to discuss all of this that you're seeing in this slide. We should be able to start talking about those. And we included a quote here. A quote is algo que dice alguien, quote. If you can film an idea in your mind, if you can imagine that idea here in my mind, follow that film idea, síguela. Follow that film idea, shot for shot. Imagen tras imagen. Escena tras escena. Scene for scene. That idea is worth making. Meaning of, if your data, if your collection of data, if the information that you are presenting is that good, is worth to take the time to build up your presentation, to practice your presentation, to plan your presentation. You shouldn't just copy and paste something just because you're late and try to present that, because I guarantee you it's going to be a disaster, a total disaster if you don't do it with time, if you don't plan, if you don't organize it. So organizing your data is very important for a successful presentation. But not just that, you have to organize it, you have to put it into a good way, into a professional way, into your slides, your PowerPoint or Prezi or whatever it is that you're using. You could be using paper, I don't know. And the other very important part that you need to practice is the way that you deliver the information, the way that you speak, the way that you move, the way that you express. But we're going to continue talking about that. So let's see one by one. Make sure your data can be seen. I have two different pictures here, but I want you to concentrate in the part that this is in an auditorium on your right side. And I don't know if we are part of the audience here in the back part of it, if you concentrate trying to read, it's like, it may be a big screen, but I still cannot read. Can you read from it? I don't know. I can't. And this looks like a very formal place. It looks like a very nice conference, but the slides, the visual aid are like, So this happens to people in the professional field. It happens, and it's bad because it's not a good visual aid. Definitely not. Take a look at this picture, the one that I'm showing here. Can anyone see what the information there says? Anyone? Let me ask you directly. I'm gonna pick some names. So, Raquel, can you see? Can you understand what that picture is showing? Raquel?
Casi no, teacher.
Well, she says no. It's like, it's kind of like a graph, right? But then you're like trying to, and then you're trying harder. And then you try harder, even harder. You're like, what? It's my sight, okay? And then you go with your eyes like, and then your faces all are like, I think that something is wrong. So that's the point here. We have seen this mistake happening again and again. And like I'm showing you here, I look it up for some picture that I couldn't find. This is from the internet. You can see the reference in the actual file. The PowerPoint file has the link for it. But I look for a picture that you can see something happening in real life. You can see that. And that's not effective. We're talking about effective strategies here. And this, what I'm showing you here, is not effective. How did this happen? You need to make sure that what you see in your computer, it's what you're going to see in that projection. Because it's not the same to look it up on your computer screen as to look it up into a bigger screen, but also look it up from 6, 10, 12 meters behind, 20 meters. A big auditorium, you need to be able to show information, to show your data to the people that are in the front, as well as to the people that are in the very end, over there, in the back, very far away. They need to be able to see the information. So we need to be careful about the size, the colors, and before we present, we should be able to go and check with the projection. Ask a friend, ask your friends, ask your partners, ask your classmates to go with you and see it. While you put it up and you show it on the screen, there should be some other people over there in the back telling you, can you see? And then the other person will say like, it's kind of like blurry. So you need to change it. You need to make it bigger, clearer. But if the answer when you say, can you see there? And the other person says, yes, it's perfect. Okay, now we're talking. Somebody's gonna speak. I heard someone. Yvonne, you wanted to say something?
No, teacher.
Okay. So here's the thing. You need to avoid the debacle of sheepishly translating hard to see numbers and labels. Because that's what is going to happen. Then people is going to like, excuse me, can you tell me what says in there? And then it's taking your time to explain something else that you were not supposed to explain. And trying to read them again to them. Oh, over here. Yes, you cannot see it, but you see, if you take a look at here, what it says and try to explain more because you have a very wrong visual aid, that shouldn't happen. That should not happen. So the key here, la clave, the key is to rehearse. Rehearse is about practicing. It's a synonym of practice. Rehearse. You need to rehearse. You need to see how it looks, but not just in your computer, in the bigger screen where you're going to present it. Okay? Yes, that's easy. Put the data in a way that everybody can see it. Not blurred, not blurry, or don't put everything in one page. You can create as many slides as you want. You can create 100 and use them for 10 seconds every slide. As long as the information, the data can be seen. Make sure your data can be seen. Let's go. Number 2. Focus most on the points your data illustrates. Like what I was showing you from my own example. I showed you a graph. And then I show you and I used a pointer and I even draw something on top of the graph so you could understand the graph. So that's the thing. The data slides, if I just put a graph over there and I don't explain it, what's the point of even putting the graph? What's the point? So that's the thing. We need to be careful of that. We need to focus on the information that we want to share. And now that you include that graph, now you need to explain. So a way to explain is like I'm showing here. This data shows, you need to speak. You need to connect yourself with what you're showing in the screen. Right now, I mean, I'm pointing to a different place right now because if I will be presenting in front of you in real life, face to face, that's what I need to do. But I'm also using my slides on the screen right now. It's a little different, but I'm showing it. That's why I'm using a pencil so you can see it now. So what I can do is like, okay, this data shows, this chart illustrates, these numbers prove, focus on that. Focus on the points that your data is illustrating. That's what it wants to say. That's why you're using that data. So I'm including an example here. For example, this is from a different research that we did. That was from a different company. Again, I cannot show you all of the information because there's a lot of information that is confidential. But it's safe if I show you this. This is from Mefasa here in Compass. And this information is about products that had scrap. There was also an investigation about some products being defective, and then it ended up being scrap. So it was just trash. And in order to lower that amount of scrap, well, we had to conduct some research. Again, some tools like cause and effect, like the Ishikawa diagram, like the Pareto diagram, and finding the root for this, it helped us to lower those effects. But I'm just showing you here at the beginning of this research, of this investigation, we found out from these 5 different products, the one with the most problems was this in the end, the one called UD 7098, as you can see it from here. In about a week, we were presenting these many problems, these many defects that ended up being scrap. So as you can see, there was a huge big problem and it needed to be lowered down. So from this data, you can see that the decisions made with the data that we collected were focused mainly on these pieces, on the UD 7098. And then, of course, we could focus on these other ones. These were just little ones, but we had to focus on them too. But from all the analysis, from the Pareto, from the data, as you can see, from what is showing here, we had to focus on this one because of the quantity happened. And from there were some other analysis trying to find out why those defects were happening. And then some actions were taken, of course. So here is the example. You saw, I have a graph here. There is a chart. I'm moving you, the audience, to the chart, and I'm pointing the information. I'm pointing the data. I'm focusing myself on the data that I want you to see. I want you to see that, and that's what I'm pointing to it. It's not good to take like half an hour to talk just about one graph. So I'm just taking a couple of minutes. Okay, that's it. Let's move on to the next one. That's what you need to do. Okay, so that's what I'm showing you with real examples, real graphs, and what we did when we presented this information into different meetings. It was presented and to be approved for the next phase. Yeah. So that's what you do here and there, here at the school and over there at the company. Organize the information and focus when you're presenting. It's very important to go to the point. Okay. Number 3, share one and only one major point from each chart. From each chart or graph, from each image, or the way that you are presented the data as a collection, you should share just one point. Because when you see things like this, I'm going to show you here the example. This is also from another investigation that we participated. This is from a project in maintenance, in terms of using a software for maintenance, for organizing the maintenance on a plant. So here's the thing. If we show all of this information at the same time in one slide, what happens? It's like, what are you showing me? Should I read here? Should I read there? Should I concentrate in here? Then automatically your audience goes crazy. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening? It's like, hey, hold your horses. Organize this information in a different way. Take it out, and then if you wanted to show me the activities that are programmed, you better put a graph like this, and then let me focus on just a little bit of the program. And then now that the data is organized and I'm just presenting one point in one chart, it's easy for me to explain to you, but it's easier for you to understand, you as the audience. and referring in general for all of the audience to understand that we are programming the activities and we're using this software, and you can see it in a graph and also in a table. And from the table, you can see it that, for example, for the month of November of 2019, we had a program for 79 and we completed 87 of those programs. It means that we completed all of the program and we even went farther. We did even more of the maintenance that were planned. Whereas if we didn't plan it, we probably didn't finish anything of it. So that's the thing. When you're trying to tell your boss of what happened in this example of what happened with what you programmed and what you did, and then that after programming, the activities, if you were covering more and more, the activities by the next month, the month of December, were less activities. So you could start focusing on a different part of the site, a different part of the facility, different machines. Effective. Going just to one point instead of trying to show everything together. Like I said before, you can use hundreds of slides. Why try to put everything in just one slide? Number 4, label chart components clearly. This is very easy to understand and to explain, I think. I showed this example. I found it also. This is not from one of my studies. This is from an example in the internet. Just a comparison of colors, hair colors, boys and girls. You can see from pink and blue. You can see it's more than hundreds for blonde girls, and for blonde boys, it's about 20. And then for brown hair color, you can see that brown, it's close for boys and girls, and they are close like to the hundreds. But it's easy to explain and to understand when you label correctly. Label, que le ponga los nombres a los colores y a los ejes, to the axis. The y-axis is the number, the x-axis, the hair color. It has the colors written over there, blonde and brown. It also has the colors for specifying boys and girls. It has all of the labels. I have seen in many presentations, formal and informal, I have seen people using graphs without labels, without them. And I'm like, what the heck am I seeing? What am I seeing? It's like, without the labels, the data cannot be presented. So you need to use the label. Label chart components clearly. Que sí estén las etiquetas. Okay, this is very easy to understand, so I'm gonna move forward to number 5. Visually highlight the aha zone. Aha. Let me explain to you. For example, from this information that I was trying to show you from the other example on focusing on just one point, there's a lot of information here, but maybe there's a purpose for it. So I'm just going to move to the first part, and I wanted to show the planning for the from October. So if I'm gonna use this big graph here, so I'm going to highlight the aha. This is what I want to show. So what I'm using here, did you see it? Did you see it? You have the big picture here, but I don't want you to concentrate in all of it. I want you to concentrate just in what is going to happen in the month of October. So I highlight it. I use a square with color. You could be using a circle. Highlight the actual point that you're going to talk about. Get it? Big difference. Instead of focusing your audience in the whole picture, focus the audience over there. Oh, so we're gonna do the aspiración de canal on the on this data, on this day. So it's like, okay, so we're focusing on that one, just that. I don't care about the rest. I don't care about the elevadores, pulidores, the bancos, no. We're only focusing on the canals. Now you see, you're my audience. You can focus on it because I'm highlighting it. Highlight. Do it. So that was an example. And number 6, but not the last one. Write a slide title. We talked about this. Write a title that reinforces the data's point. A title is always good and important when you're using slides, when you're using visual aids, when you're using a PowerPoint. Para cada diapositiva, for every slide, you should be using a title that reflects the information that you're using there. Here, my title is the write a slide title that reinforces the data's point. The number 6, that's my title. And I'm showing you an example here that is in paper, but it's the same. It shows that the result is the title. And it's big. It shows something. Yeah. Make sure to include that. And number 7, which is the last one of these PowerPoint slides, present to your audience, not to your data. Oh my goodness. How many times have you done this? I've seen you presenting, not all of you, but I've seen a lot of people presenting in the wrong way. Your audience, my audience, you are here. But what will happen if I want to look over there? It's like, oh yes, you need to present your data because it's like this. So am I presenting to the screen, to somewhere else, but not to you? Remember this, we have told you this for several years, again and again and again and again and again. Visual contact with the audience. Eye contact. Look at the people in the eyes. And when you're using a video conference, like what I'm doing right now, I'm trying to look at the camera. So you, my audience, have the feeling that I'm looking at you. Because I have to make sure that I make eye contact with you, that you have that feeling, oh, the professor is looking at me. Even if you're not showing yourselves because you have your video camera turned off. But even then, I have to show you respect. And I'm trying to explain everything by looking at you. So that's the meaning of this, present to your audience, not to your data. Your data is a visual aid, una ayuda visual. You look at it, you come back to your audience. You point at it, but you go back to your audience. Most of your time should be spent when you are explaining something, looking at your audience, looking at the people who is listening to you. Not looking at the screen, not looking to different places or ways, but looking to the front and trying to see all of the audience. Focus on that. Here are the examples. I also include more than just the picture on top of there that you're seeing that the audience is very focused on the person, but you can see from a classroom on the picture on your right side, on the bottom right side. And then of course, there's another example with a cartoon that you can see a way to use some visual aids like in paper or cardboard, and then just point at them, but looking at the audience, point at them, not look at them like this, point at them. Remember that your audience is what is important or not. If you don't do it, you end up with this, boredom and disappointment. Like, what am I being here? This happened. We see that happening. When I can see you face to face, if you were to have your video cameras on, I could see if you're paying attention to me or not. Yeah, like that. So we need to focus on presenting to the audience. And we have been talking about this, that you need to practice, that you need to plan ahead of time, that you need to change the tone of voice, that you need to move your body, you need to be positive, and so on. Many other techniques that we have discussed before in the last two sessions of classes, and that we will continue talking about to avoid this boredom and disappointment. And like I said, for next week, we're going to talk about the anxiety, how we can avoid having or feeling the anxiety when you're presenting to an audience. But okay, we covered those 7 different points. Let's talk about the homework for this week. You are working actually in one homework. You are recording your elevator pitch. You have last week and this week for working on that elevator pitch. So since you already have some assignment, I'm just gonna keep it very simple. You're going to start a discussion. It's going to be a forum, a forum discussion where you are going to speak about the most common mistakes in oral presentation. You can look it up like that on the internet. You can do some research and you're going to share your opinion, of course. That's it. That's what's going to happen for this week. Since we're talking about effective strategies, you also need to make sure to know what you're not supposed to do. The big no's, the don'ts, the don't do it. Those, you need to also understand what is wrong. Okay, so that's going to be the discussion for this week. And for next class, like I said, we're going to talk about the anxiety and also vocabulary. Technical vocabulary that is used as an industrial engineer. And we're going to cover about some technology, some vocabulary for technology. You're going to have some exercises with that vocabulary, and we're going to talk about the anxiety when you present. So I'm introducing you where you're going to be seeing next week. Any questions? I try to be fast because we have some people that is absent right now and we need to continue, but I'm trying to not let people out from our class so that we're not covering a lot of it. Yes? Any questions? No questions.
No,
Then,
teacher.
okay, I'm gonna stop recording. Just hold on, wait for me because I'm gonna check the attendance, okay?